There's so much. I want to try to move us along. I think we're still under the impact topic. How has this impacted higher ed from the faculty perspective? I've heard some enrollment challenges come into play. So I want to at least give Eric an opportunity to talk about what have been some of the challenges that we've seen in the enrollment management piece. And I'll say this, I was reading an article, the American Council of Education, they projected that there would be a 15% enrollment drop this fall and a 25% enrollment drop for international students. And they equated that to like $23 billion that will be lost just from that. And so it sounded like it's going to be more than that. So how has this impacted you all in the enrollment arena, Eric? And what have been some challenges and some surprises that you've noticed in how we move forward with this?
Yeah, sure. Great conversations. Great points all around. I'll stick to the question. One thing I'll say is don't get, or there's a lot of talk about these like doom and gloom, 20% down, 15% down, 25% down in the fall. I don't know that that's really going to be across the board. I think people, when you make those comments, need to think about the state that you're in, the type of institution that it is, because it's going to differ for different states and institutions. Whereas what Dr. Bates said about Akron, I'm shocked to hear that. No school in Tennessee is going to do that because, and I don't know what the state of Ohio is like, but the state of Tennessee has had some really good years and some really good investments and support in higher education. And so no school right now, unless things just go to, fire happens in the fall, we're in a good position to kind of weather the storm a little bit. And then also so states have an impact on it. State budgets have an impact on what schools are going to have to do. The other part is cities. So some students will decide to choose alternate plans. I'm willing to bet there's not a ton of students that are just going to be like, I'm sitting at home, I'm not going anywhere in the fall. Because those parents are probably going to be like, you're going to do something. Even if you do online education, a real online education, most students are probably going to do something. So schools that have an actual robust online education, like University of Memphis, we have a great Global program. I know Purdue University has online, Arizona State, there's, Maryland, there's great online programs that are out there. Some students might choose to do that. Other students might choose to go to their Plan B school or Plan C school, stay home at their local community college for a semester. Other cities like a Memphis, a Nashville, big cities that are out there across the world, Boston, places like that, students might choose to stay home because their parents may not want them to go stay in those residence halls out in a city where there's a great college, but maybe there's not a lot around, there's not a big hospital, things like that. They want to stay close to so I think the schools that are in large metropolitan areas might fare better. For us, I'll be honest, really shocked as an admissions director, an enrollment manager. We're charged to bring in the class. State schools, particularly state schools and private schools too, we get big paychecks twice a year, right? The fall semester and spring semester. And so if an enrollment team doesn't do their job, then that's a lot at stake for the university. So for the fall semester, we were really, pins and needles, still on pins and needles, and knock on wood, the last 3 weeks, our numbers have come up. Part of that is announcing a virtual online orientation, which kind of calms some fears for people, being able to interact and being able to engage virtually, to have those conversations. So offices that are able to make that shift really quick were able to make those, to keep that engagement for students going. But, it's still, you never know. It's a week-to-week thing. For freshmen, our jobs are hanging on the decisions of 17-year-olds. And so we're still, pushing hard. I'm sure every admissions director is still on pins and needles, not knowing what they're going to do. But I would say for some are probably freaking out more than others. just because of other environmental factors that we don't have control over.
So I know Tierney has his hand up. I'm gonna let him go first, but I have a couple things I want to say in response to Eric, and I know Urisonya hasn't gone yet either. So I'm gonna hold my mule, but I gotta say one thing.
Yeah.
So real quick, I was just going to echo what Eric said. I'm at UNC Chapel Hill. We have a brand. So when we look at enrollment management right now, our deposits are pretty much either up in some regards. We are planning to go back in the fall. So our deposits for orientation are actually up. We are also doing a virtual orientation from that uniqueness. So just like Dr. Stokes has mentioned about really the institutions with certain brands and a following. Now, what we'll probably take a hit is our international student population, because we do have a lot of international students. But that means we'll just buckle down on our efforts within the state of North Carolina of trying to get those students from there. But I echo the same thing. I think where the opportunity is, as Dr. Stokes was mentioning, was for community colleges. And I would love to hear from the community college space, because what I see in North Carolina is a lot of folks will now start at the since we have 58 here, at the community college level from a cost effectiveness, and then look to transfer in, because we have a lot of transfers in UNC Chapel Hill from that perspective. And again, stay home closer, go to the community college, get my associate's degree, and then transfer into one of the bigger schools to finish my 4-year degree. That is what we're hearing here in North Carolina around that. So the community college space also will see something that maybe a surge, or even the opportunity from the technical side of increase of people coming back to get recertified, re-educated.
So that's a great transition for Urisonya. Would you like to respond? Don't forget to hit unmute. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, those are some of the conversations that we are having at Odessa College, really looking at, well, first of all, so let me set a little bit of a background. We already are a little bit unusual for community colleges because we have 8-week terms. Most of our classes are hybrid courses. And so the transition to completely online, yes, has been difficult, but we already had kind of, I think, a little bit of a head start in that. Many of our professors are already certified with online education, and we have that already in place and how to get them certified. We opened up a professional learning center, particularly that deals with online learning and things like that. And so our professors were doing that. Now, the problem with that is, and I think this goes back to the time frame, those who had not been certified or who didn't have those skills completely, you can't make that jump in a week, and so that was still a difficult transition, and has been a difficult transition, and will continue to be a difficult transition for many of our professors. Now, having said that, we're looking at more numbers, our numbers growing because of the fact that a lot of our students, and so I also had, let me give you a little bit of background. Our area, we don't have that many cases of COVID-19. I'm in West Texas. The size of our town is, we're small, we're about 120,000, very small. We only have 80 cases. So this has not hit us. We have not had the peak that many of the areas in other states, and even in our state, any other cities have had. And so with that, we're in a totally different scenario. It's almost like we're kind of just like in this little locked away, cabin. Now, having said that, we're waiting for the peak to happen, because 2 hours away from us, Lubbock, Texas, where I live part-time and my husband is there, they have about 280,000 people, and there's over 560 cases. El Paso, the other way, the cases have blown up. Amarillo, 4 hours away from here, has about 200,000 people. They have over 1,000 cases, and the CDC is coming down there. So you can see how this is very different, and we're just waiting. We're kind of like just waiting for it to happen. So basically, we're kind of, even though we've taken a lot of steps to deal with COVID-19 and the coronavirus and all these different things, for much of our practices, we moved online, but the city is very much business as usual, if that makes sense. However, for us, for all of our students that go to the neighboring systems like Texas Tech University, that would go to these larger schools, they can then stay here for a semester or two, or if we're looking at the coronavirus going for another year, 2021 or 2 years, they could stay here, attend Odessa College online, finish, some prereqs, and then transfer to those institutions once we, figure out how this is going to go, in a year or two. And so we look at it as this is an open door for us. Those students who would have normally gone down the street 2 hours away to the Texas Tech University will then stay here at home where it's safe and they will stay here with us. Now, having said that, we don't have a lot of housing in my, and you know, I'm more hands-on with my work. I love working with students. D, y'all know that know me. I love being hands-on with my students. And a lot of times my thought process is more of in those students that, and especially when we deal with access and equity and things of that nature, what about the student that was living in the residence hall at this small community college who has nowhere else to go? And we've shut everything down. They don't have internet at home. They don't have access at home. And what does that student do? You know, how does that work out for that student who may even live here in Odessa, but if we close down the residence hall, they literally have nowhere to go? How does that work for those students? And so my mind is going to those stories that I hear every day with students, the students that I see every day that we've worked with, and the pockets of students like that across the country that are dealing with this. Because out of that 20 million that you mentioned, so many of those students, they don't have access to, you know, the technology at home that would allow them to be full-time online students and allow them to be, you know, able to access all of these different things that we have available. So we can do all these great things, but if we still can't put that equipment in their hands, if we can't provide internet service, if we can't provide those things, and especially if they can't go to the library for free internet, if they can't go down the street to those places, Starbucks is closed, all these different places, then what are they going to do? So we still have to figure out, how do we, in this new age, in this new world of COVID-19, this new normal, how are we going to provide those resources for those students that are not coming on our campus? We can't open the doors to our campus anymore for a while. How are we going to provide those resources so they can still have some sense of access and equity in their educational opportunity?
Ooh, thank you, Urisonya. So I want to keep us here so to allow people to respond. We're still under impact with the faculty student experience, enrollment. If anybody wants to respond now to anything that has been said related to Urisonya, we'll stay here, and then I'm going to move us forward to how do we move forward and for solutions.
Hey, there's a couple things. Well, two things, and I'm gonna still get back in. So one, I want to go to Urisonya's point about the student experience. I think that is so important. I think a lot about student success and engaging with our members at EAD, a lot about student success. But I think the alternative to that is to also think about the risk we're placing students in when we think about how we manage this critical infrastructure. It only takes one student to die to change this entire conversation. I think a lot of us are still dealing in a space of optimism, which is important. I don't think that we need to be doom and gloom, to Eric's point, but we also have to use data and information and understand there is no rational actor, right? We have this mindset that you talked about relying on the decision of a 17-year-old. Think about their parent who may be losing their job, who may not know what the actual value proposition is for staying in, you mentioned staying in major cities. Well, if you're in New York, you're not staying, right? If you're in Los Angeles, you're concerned about staying. So being in a city alone is not going to be enough to weather this storm. And I would say the other thing is, we're talking with our members. I'm just saying that even with folks I know who work in higher ed, to measure your optimism, the level that we're seeing in terms of increase in deposits is on par with every other year. But we've also seen over the last 5 years a 22% increase in people withdrawing their deposits. They've given you their money, they came to your orientation, and they either went somewhere else or didn't go anywhere. And we're going to expect to see even more of that in this future, going back to Urisonya's point, because if you are in your living room and we promise you some other kind of experience, it may not be enough for you to risk either continuing to invest in an education you're not sure is going to be lasting or have the impact that you want. And we're ignoring the fact about prestige and rankings and students' experiences and expectations about schools. They just don't view them all the same way. Right, and so there's a pocket of students who will say, you know what, I'm going to go to the local community college, or I'm going to go to my third choice school. There are a bunch of other students who are going to say, I'm just going to wait this thing out and see what happens. And schools are responding to that. I don't know if you guys saw in the news today, but all the public 4 years in New Jersey, save Rutgers, which that's an interesting point there, went out to market to their students in New Jersey. New Jersey has the highest outmigration of college students in the country. They told all their students, if you come back for the fall and just re-enroll either online or in person at one of our New Jersey institutions, we will guarantee we'll help you navigate transferring out when this is passed. I think that we're going to see a lot of folks coming up with value propositions for that, but there's no promise there. What articulation agreements have they worked through or have they created that they're clear on? Is it going to be a one-off process? Can students rely on that? Can parents rely on that? Now, if we start thinking about our equity populations, what we're also missing is this is not going to be a traditional economic downturn in the way that we saw in 2008. This is going to have a much longer curve, and it's going to affect a much larger group of people. And so the idea of folks coming back to retrain and retool and re-educate in the way we traditionally see with economic downturns, we cannot rely upon in this space. Some of our traditional assumptions that we make about enrollments are going to have to be adjusted based on what's happening here. And I think a lot of us are not using all the right kinds of inputs as we think about what's the data that we use to make decisions about what this is going to look like. I think Sue's point about the fact that none of us know or can predict what this is going to be, but we all know it's not going to be, it's fall 2019. And I think we have to have better conversations about what information we use. And I think a lot of us, especially at public institutions, we're in a very difficult position. I was a political appointee for the governor of Georgia, so I get it. Some of us can't make the decisions we like or say the things we know we should say because it would go against our government and our state or what our state executive is saying. And some folks are using the example of Purdue. Purdue has a former state executive as its leader. They have an online unit that can help to infuse them with resources. They created their own COVID tests. Many of you are not Purdue. So thinking about making statements that look like what they're saying they're going to do, which I don't believe they can deliver on anyway. I think it's provocative. I don't think they can deliver it. But we cannot rely on those kinds of front-end, politically motivated statements that have no reflection in reality to make our decisions for what we're going to do for students in the fall and for them to be making decisions on. And the other thing about optimism is this. This is a class of 2020 seniors who've missed the entire second half of their senior year. They are making decisions now about hope and about what they are frustrated by, not about reality. And so there's students who are saying they're going to go now. I'm telling you in August, they're telling you something different. We better have very clear plans and very clear contingencies because there are a lot of schools and even state public schools that are scaffolded by their state run on very thin margins. And we're not talking about we're not talking about losing 1,000 in some schools. If you lose 50 students from your incoming class, that's that. People need to be honest and start having honest, clear-eyed conversations and set real expectations, or we're going to have a real mess both of what people have planned for or not planned for in the fall, but also how people are going to respond to higher ed, where we already have a historic low in public perception. We have to think about that.
Thank you, Khadish. Dr. Borrego, do you want to go? And then Rob?
A couple things. The ROI piece just has been a drumbeat for me because for the last 4 to 5 years, one of my biggest fights at a university in a state that has a high level of industry, you know, first it goes from the place of, oh, we need more tradesmen, right? So all of the state funding starts going to tradesmen, but none of those legislators call me and ask me to get their kid into a trade school when they want their student to go to school. They're not looking at trades for them, right? So that whole piece about ROI was already a bite for us in the last 3 to 4 years of rhetoric. I think that at least, you know, and this really, Dr. Moore knows more about this than me, but I understand that good pedagogy online, good online pedagogy, there's not a difference in student success as it relates to learning, whether it's online or in the class. I think it's going to push us even more to make that ROI case. The second thing, and a couple of you said this, and when Urisonya said this, I was a first-gen student. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a home address. I didn't have a house. When school, I mean, my big fear my freshman year was, oh my God, what am I going to do with the stuff in my room for the summer? Like, I can go find a place, but I didn't even know. So I think, you know, and this is my little bit of my soapbox, and then I'll stop with this. We hear so much about grit. And the frustrating thing for me about grit, about the way that grit is being contextualized is many of us at state universities or regionals or urban universities are dealing with populations that are on the edge of fragility, not necessarily because of their own choices, but they lived in LA Unified and the LA Unified didn't offer any advanced classes, right? Lots of beautician classes, not advanced. Do you think the people in LA picked that, right? So there's some fragility. The students that go to community colleges in California, now that the CSU, College of the People, started limiting enrollment, if you are a freshman and your parents say, get out and go to that community college. If you go to community college for 1 or 2 semesters, you can't transfer to the CSU now. You have to get 60 units in order to transfer, and many of our families don't understand that. So for me, this exacerbating the fragility that many of our students are navigating every day, and no one ever values that as grit. You know, now we're teaching people how to be gritty. I'm like, dudes, we have had people walking on stepping stone to stepping stone for years. I'm afraid that that's a population that this is going to exacerbate for some of the same reasons. In addition to everything we said, the other thing is if they're first-gen families, they're not going to have access as quickly to how to keep your plans light and your hopes alive and make a plan for what's going to happen in your life on September 1.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rob, did you want to respond before we move forward?
Those are all great points. One of the big things, a concept that I'm sure Urisonya knows and Sue knows is articulation agreements. And the biggest issue, the biggest barrier for community college students not being able to transfer to a foreign institution is the lack of articulation agreement. It's the situation where in North Carolina, for instance, you could go and get an AAS degree, right? And because you got an AAS degree, you cannot transfer those credits to a 4-year institution because it's an AAS degree as opposed to an AS degree. But that AAS degree is applied information, and if you actually look at the curriculum and compare the difference between an AAS degree and if you look at the admission requirements into a 4-year institution and the classes that are part of the AAS degree, they're actually the same classes. But there's a provision written into some of these 4-year institutions that says you cannot transfer any credits from an AAS degree. But it's the same class. It's exactly the same class. So it's like stuff like that. So the one thing is that we can't fix that overnight. So we can't make these changes. Like it's like we've got 75,000 fires, and you got to pick the one to put out, and you just can't do it. The final thing the other thing to sort of wrap it up in terms of impact is we are living in a changed time, but we cannot actually evaluate the time to make decisions about the future. We know from research that the most pivotal age for minority Black males is that 5 and 6 age, right? We know that if a young student does not have a certain reading proficiency at 5 and 6, they may never make that up again. They may be behind for the rest of their career. So we've got a whole lot of students right now that just missed out on 5 or 6 months worth of instruction that they needed in order to be successful. Like we know that's going to be a problem in the future, but we also know that doesn't show up maybe until 3rd grade, right? So that could be 3 years from now before we actually know that that student who can't read right now is because of what happened in 2020. The other thing that I'm running into is I am getting flooded with all these opportunities to do research about the COVID impacts. And I was talking to my doc students. I said, look, we're getting ready to get flooded with all these surveys. We're getting ready to have survey fatigue. Like who owns that data, right? So like there are 45,000 researchers right now sitting at home thinking of what they're going to do for their research and developing some survey. And come fall, we're getting ready to get bombarded with it. But how many times are we going to have, we can answer the same question, right? And I think that's actually going to cause an issue, is that we need a central repository for the information. So for instance, right now, if I want to go pull achievement data for K-12, I can go to NCS, right? And I can go pull that data because all that data, the states are reporting it to one spot. But what we're getting ready to have a whole bunch of individual researchers getting IRBs at individual schools that are being approved to send out these surveys, and we're gonna have an incomplete picture basically. So then what's going to happen is people are going to start making decisions off of that. And going back to my point about the emergency remote teaching, how are you evaluating the instruction? I don't know what it is at your institution, but my institution, They made our teacher evaluations completely optional this year. There's pros and cons to that. You know, there's going to be implications. I'm on a tenure track. 4 years from now, people may not remember what happened in 2020. How am I going to tell that story in 4 years from now when maybe things have settled down some? But I got a reviewer who goes, "Oh, hey, you know, he wasn't doing any work. What's going on then? Or why are you missing teacher evaluations from an entire semester? Like, what are those actual implications? We don't know. And how do you prepare for something you don't even know? It's unprecedented."
Okay, this is wow. So I want to shift us to, so we've kind of, remember the title was impact, infrastructure, and the final one was implications. So I want us to kind of shift towards the implications and moving forward and what do we do? But if anybody else wants to respond to anything that was said with impact right now, go ahead and then we'll shift to the implications.
I just wanted to add two things. The 4-year degree, that hitting on what Dr. Rob Moore was talking about, that's why we created just this past year the 4-year applied science degree for that very thing at Odessa College. So we're a 2-year, but we offer that 4-year degree. Secondly, that technical degree, keep in mind, and maybe this needs to be something, because we've been having conversations about this too. What are we going to do with these technical degrees that so many students are getting, but we have to social distance? We have to, think about how that fits into that as well, because we need all these nurses, but how do we teach them in a clinical setting? How do we do all these different things? If they are in cosmetology, how do we teach them in, a cosmetology classroom where, they're supposed to be close to each other? How do you continue to have those type of conversations? And especially when we deal with, knowing that, those students may be some of the very students that, Dr. Borrego talked about that really need these educational opportunities. How do we continue to provide those opportunities for those students when you can't just turn, those types of programs into online instruction only? So how do you do that in a, 2021, 22, and even 2020 environment for students to come?
Just one point that's connected to that. I think that a lot of folks are talking about what's happening specifically at the institution, but also forgetting about the other parts of the higher ed ecosystem that have to move much more quickly. Going to the point Urisonya made, accreditors are simply not giving answers fast enough for what needs to happen for those practical programs. And that's true at both the 2-year colleges, but also true at the 4-year institutions where you have highly applied programs that also have numbers of state requirements, national accreditor requirements around health and social distancing that all have to link up together to determine how you move forward. And there simply isn't an answer there. And I hate to be the pessimist, so I want Eric to come in and say something positive after I say this. But I don't think anyone's also dealing with the fact that we are fully expecting a second wave of the pandemic after people go home for Thanksgiving, in the same way we saw it happen when people came back from spring break. When we open up travel again and people move more freely and get a little bit more relaxed and, hey, when I want to see my granny, and then you gave granny the COVID, and then you came back and gave everybody at campus the COVID. You should choose to reopen, and then we're back to another situation, going to the point that Rob made about emergency remote instruction. People are simply not making plans for the fall that actually reflect what we can expect to see. And so when I start thinking about implications, before I move to that, I'm saying, how do we help people deal with the reality now? And from an academic planning perspective, your full-time faculty who are on a 9-month contract are leaving in a single week. If you have not planned for a multiplicity of futures, how do you get that faculty to plan for a fall semester and not in a one-off place, right? Because going to Eric's point, you're going to promise these freshmen an academic experience in the fall. You have to think about how you deliver them a full semester of coursework, not one-offs where you can catch can. People are going to expect from us much higher quality and much more thoughtful planning as we move into the fall, and we simply have not delivered.
So much. Dr. Brewer, and then Eric, then Dr. Brewer, and then we'll move. Well, Eric, Dr. Brewer, Tierney, and then we'll move.
Well, mine is just a quick point. There will be a second wave of COVID.
Yeah,
my wife is in healthcare, and she has already told me when flu season comes in the fall, there will be a second wave.
Yeah, I don't certainly doubt that, and I want to say something that's not always optimistic, but to add to your point. Before I say that, I do want to snaps to Dr. Borrego's mentions about the inequalities. I think that this has brought about it's a renewed revision of, hey, there are a new vision of the inequalities and put light in that space. But to the point of opening up, I had a question, and then I'll make my statement. The question is, I guess, to Khadish and Dr. Robin, anybody, do you think universities have, they've made statements about the quality of the, I like your term, emergency.
Remote instruction or emergency
Remote
Rob, what did you call it?
Have people made statements that is as quality as the regular online, or are they just making the assumption that it is? Because I feel like people who I talk to, they know that they're just throwing something together.
No, I think provosts and faculty, at least in my engagement, are being pretty honest that this is not high quality and that they haven't had enough time, but they can't use that excuse again in the fall. And my concern is not about how they respond now, but they haven't done anything, to Rob's point, to do anything better or different in the fall. Those trainings, that engagement had to have happened 2 months ago. It can't happen the week before the fall semester begins. And a lot of your faculty who teach in the summer, so people are saying, well, we're gonna have folks who are teaching in the summer, are gonna be online, we'll be ready. Those are term faculty, contract faculty, and adjuncts who already know how to teach online because they've been doing it for a while. These aren't your traditional import faculty.
Lots of them are going to be gone in this.
That's right.
I mean,
Taboo tomorrow. They're going in the furloughs, in the layoffs we just talked about.
One of the way this is going to be managed is by having the people who have the most experience actually in the classroom that are adjunct, or they're not going to be teaching. And so in addition to all of those things that you've mentioned, it's going to be exacerbated by the fact that the people who know how to create online material are often in regional comprehensives adjuncts.